Hi, my name is Rhonda Phelps, and I'm here to support conscious women over 50. And the title of today's video is Your Boundaries Suck. Hi, welcome to my channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about the title of this video, which is Your Boundaries Suck. First, we're going to go over what are boundaries and why do we feel drained when we don't have boundaries, and why do we have a hard time making decisions, and how well do you know yourself? First, let's decide what boundaries are. Boundaries are designed to protect us, clarify our responsibilities, preserve our physical and emotional well being and energy, and to live by our own values and moral standards. Setting boundaries is, I think, difficult at first, but once people know what your boundaries are and you have them established, people will learn to respect those boundaries. I've had several situations in my life that I have let people overrun my boundaries over and over and over and over again. And that's actually one of the reasons why I left my job just recently. A few years ago, they hired an employee who was supposed to be an operations manager. And a couple of months after he had worked there, I came into work after lunch and I saw him in the front of the building pacing back and forth and back and forth. And immediately I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to go around to the back door. I don't know what this guy is doing. I don't know what he wants. But then I decided, you know what? No, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to pull up there and see what his deal is. Well, when I pulled up there and got out of the car, and I had my dogs with me because I take them to work, and they had gotten out of the car, and he comes up to me and starts reprimanding me for removing some papers off of the front counter, which were an authorization for the employees to work in the shop on their own personal stuff. I was aware also that there was a stack in the break on our break room and also a pile of them out in the shop. And he came in and I drove up and he started yelling and screaming at me. He got about 12 inches from my face. And so I put up my hand to say, back off, dude, back off. And by the time he got done, I was just over the moon with anxiety. I walked in the building, I was shaking. I went in my office. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't do anything. And apparently one of the employees had pulled up outside when this was going on, and he saw what was going on, and he was getting ready to come over and intervene. And he came into the office, and I honestly barely remember talking to him. And after that, I went home. It was like 1 o'clock, and I just went home and I contacted my boss and told her what had happened. And the next Monday, they actually let him go. I wasn't the only situation that had happened to, and that was a huge leap over my boundaries to do that. But what was even worse is that I did not receive any recognition whatsoever from any of the management or my boss to say, "Hey, you know what? We're really sorry that happened. That shouldn't have happened, and we're really sorry that that happened to you." I got nothing. I got nothing whatsoever. And so that was a difficult situation because I had boundaries and I tried to adhere to them, but then the positive reinforcement wasn't there for what my actual feelings were. And I didn't feel safe. I started at that point in time not being safe at work because of the way that my employers handled the situation. And that was very, very, very difficult for me. But I do realize from that point in time, I set some stronger boundaries. And over the next couple of years, I would have to say that things really didn't change. The management really wasn't in tune with what was going on with their employees or with me, or the fact that I didn't feel safe. I had several conversations with my boss about it, and apparently they were clueless. So I did end up quitting after that event and other things that had kept happening about 2 years later. And I had just had it, and I quit. I walked away from it. And that was a huge, strong boundary. I I was terrified that I quit my job. I mentioned that in a previous video, but I knew I had to get out of there. Had no respect for my boundaries whatsoever. Um, and it was just time for me to leave. I had to do it. I had to reinforce that boundary and establish the way of life that I wanted and the way that I wanted to be treated. One of the big factors for me deciding to leave my job is I was totally and utterly 100% exhausted. I had no desire to go out and spend time with friends or family. I do acrylic painting, and I think that part of what saved me because I just immersed myself in those projects and everything just kind of dissipated and disappeared in the outer world. But that was another deciding factor of why I left my job is because I just every morning I would drag myself out of bed and I had a hard time going to work and I was exhausted at the end of the day. It was the same thing over and over and over and over again. And I had been doing the same thing with bookkeeping for about 40 years, and it wasn't the work. It wasn't the work that exhausted me. It was being in that environment and a total lack of respect in many ways, which was really disheartening for me because the first 5 years that I worked there, it was totally different, and I'm not sure what changed, but it also changed for me. Like I said, I had started secluding myself from people, and I was letting myself go. I wasn't, taking care of myself in any way, shape, or form. I used to hike and spend time with family and friends and do all kinds of social activities and go to concerts, and for some reason, I just became this recluse that didn't really wanna go anywhere or do anything. And when I left my job, this is what that boundary did for me, is when I left my job, it opened up a whole new world for me, and I realized I got to choose who I am around, who I get to expose myself to, and if someone violates my boundaries, they need to be aware that, I'm not gonna stick around. I'm just not gonna stick around. Another thing I noticed with the lack of boundaries is how difficult it was to make a decision. Even a simple decision was incredibly difficult to make. But when I started establishing those more firm boundaries, it took away a lot of those options and those wishy-washy types of decisions because I didn't have boundaries. And by setting those boundaries, I was able to say, okay, is this crossing the line with me or not? There's a hard boundary and a soft boundary. The hard boundaries are absolutely not, no, no way, this is not gonna happen. And that happened to me recently with, in selling my condo. The inspection was done last Friday, and the seller sent me their response, or the buyer sent me their response with what they wanted done in my home. And I started looking over it and I just started panicking. A lot of the things were little things. All of them together wasn't that big of a deal, but there were a couple of things that I felt pretty strongly about. But at first, I just became so anxious and just immediately felt drained about the whole thing. I had to set it aside. I watched a comedy movie that night, and I went to bed early last night. And this morning I got up and I stood firm on what I wanted, and there were 2 things that I refused to do, and I told them that I was firm on it. The people who were involved with buying my house, it seems to have a lot of money, and so not that that has anything to do with what kind of a person you are, it just affected this situation because the actual buyer was the grandson of these people that were making the decisions. And what they had told their realtor was this: if I didn't do everything that they asked for on this inspection notice, then the deal was off. And I said, fine, the deal's off. You know, I don't like threats. Nobody's going to threaten me. And if I wouldn't have had boundaries, I wouldn't have been able to say that. I probably would have sucked it up, and it would have cost me probably about $2,500 more to do these things that didn't need to be done. And I will want to point out, y'all, for if you're going through these inspections, when the inspector puts on there that he recommends something or he comments about something, he's not saying I recommend that the seller do this. It's a recommendation. And that's what I pointed out. I said, you know what? This is a recommendation, not necessarily for me. These people can buy this house or buy my condo and they can fix it themselves. This is what I'm going to do, and I'm firm about it. And if I don't know what's in the contract, I didn't have a chance to read it through yet. But if they want to cancel the whole deal, you know, that's their choice. Because what had happened when they made the offer is they send it out, normally the period is like a 30 to 45-day period that from the offer date to the closing, and they wanted to extend it out to 63 days, which I agreed on, and also the sellers in Yuma that I'm purchasing from also agreed that. So, I mean, at this point in time, there were 7 weeks left still till I closed on my house, which would give me, from what I understand about the market in the area that I'm in, it would have given me adequate time to get another offer and still close. And so by standing by those boundaries, I didn't feel like I was pushed over. Once I made that decision, I decided this is the way it's going to be, and that's that. And then I was able to move on. But without making that decision and saying, this is it, I'm not, this is a hard, hard, hard boundary. And one of the things that prompted that was when somebody threatens me. That's a bad idea. Boundaries can include anything from what time you're going to go to bed, what you're going to have to dinner, how you're going to drive, anything to do with family, friends, relationships, work. There's all boundaries that are set up there. And I think once we go through setting up those boundaries, life is easier and decisions are easier to make. An important part of setting boundaries is knowing yourself and being familiar with yourself. Because if you don't know yourself and you don't know what you want or what you need, then it's going to be really hard to establish some hard boundaries. It's going to be hard to establish soft boundaries. One of the things that I did that I got from listening to other podcasts were to get up in the morning and look at yourself in the mirror. I mean, really look at yourself eye to eye in the mirror. I did that, and I actually I got out of the shower and I used a mirror and I looked at the backside of myself too. And I decided that I didn't like what I thought. I was like, oh my gosh, I look like this old, aging woman with a saggy body. And I just wasn't really happy about that at all. But every morning I would go in the bathroom and I would look at myself in the eye and I would look at my body and I would look all over it. And I have to say, today I've got the same body. Now, my body has not changed at all. And I'm getting there. But now when I look at myself, I see myself through other people's eyes in some ways. I've learned to take care of myself a little bit better. One of the things that I used to do all the time is I would listen to podcasts or videos almost all day, every day. My job was so routine for me that I was actually able to work better when I was listening to something. And I found myself listening to 6 to 7 hours a day from when I woke up until I went to bed of social media. And a lot of what I was involved in were political commentaries. And I decided not to do that, not to do that anymore. And so I stopped listening to them. I stopped, having that negativity being fed into my life. And it made a big difference. And that is a boundary too. You have to set a boundary with yourself. It's not always with other things or other people, it's boundaries within yourself. And I know if I cross that boundary with myself and I start listening to those podcasts all over again, I know where my thoughts are going to go. I know what's going to happen to my day. I know where that's going to lead me. Another boundary I set up for myself was leaving my phone in the other room at night. And that really helped a lot. I didn't feel like I was connected to anything. I wasn't worried if it was going to ring or if I'd get a notification. And I felt a lot better about how I manage that situation. I know that I often will, even though I don't hear a notification or I don't hear anything, I'll check my phone anyway. And which is a habit. It's not crazy, but it sounds like it's crazy sometimes. Sometimes I just sit in silence and see what I can hear, not necessarily hear loud noises or soft noises, but see what I hear within myself and see if there's anything that I need to hear from myself. It's hard. This is a really, really, really noisy world. And even when I sit in silence, sometimes my, refrigerator will turn on. And this is at my house. The refrigerator will turn on or the heater will kick on. And it's not really silence. I know going into nature is probably one of the best ways to connect with nature to get to know yourself. But I haven't taken the opportunity to do that lately, which I do plan on doing. Part of boundaries that has to do with your energy is making sure that you know where you're putting your energy into. If you're feeling exhausted or you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, then your energy might not be directed where you want it to go. It also needs to be taken into consideration of other people and your energy. Some people will want to be around you because you have a good energy, but you might have something in you, a boundary, for example, that says, no, I don't want to be around this person. And you need to really make that clear. I've heard several people say, and I'm guilty of this too, when the phone rings and you see it's one of your friends and you know you're going to be on the phone for like an hour. So you don't answer the phone, and I have a lot of friends who mutually feel that way. So we know that if our call isn't answered, it's because they don't have time to talk on the phone for an hour, which is perfectly fine. But that's a boundary that we've set that we don't want to go over. I've talked to some friends and said, hey, I've got 15 minutes to talk on the phone. We can't do another hour phone call, but I really want to talk to you. So setting up even boundaries like that is a time saver. And it also helps you share yourself and your energy with the people that you want to. Another result of poor boundaries are bad sleeping habits, the overuse of over the counter or illegal drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, anything that is addictive in nature. Those are some of the things that you should definitely set up with boundaries for yourself. I used to come home from work every day and I like the White Claw, so I'd have a White Claw every day after work and not really thinking about what it was doing to me. But then I started realizing, do I really want to do that? What is that doing for me? I'm pretty healthy in a lot of ways, except that I was doing that. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that something that I decided that I didn't want to do. Joan, I'm having a really hard time making this video because I'm sitting on the ground because that seems to work the best for me. But my dogs are wandering around here. That was June that just walked by. And you can see Bentley's tail back there. And so they're a little bit distracting sometimes. I guess my boundaries with my pets is another area that people can work on. I'm pretty good with my dogs. They spend almost all of the day with me, but, that's definitely a boundary that could set is with my pets. So I tried to cover in my video, what are boundaries? Why do we feel drained if we have poor boundaries? Why do we have a hard time making decision, and how well do we know ourselves? If you wanna stick around, after this video, I'm sure I'll have some pretty good blooper from this video and other videos too that you can watch. So if you like my video, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Another thing I noticed about having a lack of boundaries is how difficult it was to make decisions. There are 5-year words. Going to be learning to listen to our intuition, stepping away from what doesn't serve you, learning how to trust yourself, and taking action.